whenever I speak to people like yourself who started out in sport, this might be me being presumptuous, but there are lessons that they learned either on the pitch, on the court, on the field that kind of fed them and supported them throughout all the transitions in their journey. Is that the case with you?
Oh, for sure. There was so much I picked up on, even not just the on court or on field skill that I developed, but the mentality, of course, of just learning how to be successful. A big thing that's overlooked is teamwork. That's one of the best things I've learned from sports is realizing that, and I tell athletes when I talk to them all the time that your teammates are going to be called coworkers one day. Your coach is going to be called a boss or a manager. The referees are going to be called officers out in society. So I've learned how to work with these different people in sport and just transition seamlessly over into the business and, quote unquote, normal world, and it's been helping me out a lot.
It's interesting, and not to be antagonistic or controversial, but when you read a lot of information that's shared and it's commonly believed about success and business, you hear a lot of advocacy around self-supremacy. It's all about yourself. It's about what you're focusing on, what you're doing. Just worry about yourself. But when you talk to people who have been in crisis, who have played sport and been in the military, the first thing they say, 9 out of 10 times, and you said it, is team. So you didn't talk about yourself, your focus, your hustle, all of which in my mind is a given. You talked about your team. And I think what happens is in sport and in military and crisis, you can't really hide. Like you can have a broken philosophy and
Right.
still work within an organization and not get found out for many years and start to believe your own ideology around what makes you successful. But if you're playing basketball, for example, if your ideology is broken, it shows up in real time and it's obvious to everybody watching and everybody on the team.
Absolutely.
What was your first lesson you learned around team? Was that a belief you always had, or is that something that you had to learn working with a highly competitive dynamic on the court?
Oh, I had to learn it. I had to learn it. I came into the sport as an individual. I knew it was a team sport, but I came in to get mine. I'm just being honest with you. I came in to shine. Again, initially played the sport just because I love to play basketball. I love to, put the ball in the hoop as a kid. I love to stop whoever is trying to do that against me, just as a competitive, child. So for me, I just individually wanted to do my thing. Because again, when you get into basketball, you start off playing one-on-one at the playground, one-on-one with your siblings and your friends. So it's not always a team sport when you first get into it. So I came in and I had to learn the team aspect with working with others. Oh, I have to pass the ball to somebody else. I'm not the only one that's supposed to score. So I had to learn these different things, like that, and learn, that individually, I just must do my part to contribute to the team as a whole. So I don't totally just lose myself. I can still do my own thing, but it now is a contribution to a bigger picture. And that's what I had to learn.
And I like the last part about what you said, because that self-focused ambition is not a bad thing, but
No.
sometimes people get stuck there. And that's what they reference, where if you're honest with yourself, anytime you've ever achieved something worthwhile, there were always people who were helping you along the way.
Right.
What I think would be interesting is, when was the first lesson that you had on the court where you realized, okay, yes, I'm ambitious. Yes, I'm competitive. Yes, I want to get mine. But if I don't start integrating this with serving my team and working collaboratively, this isn't going to go well. Like, what was that like? The story of that first incident where you had that realization?
Well, it happened early. It happened pretty early. I was 11, and it's actually a story. So I was 11 years old, and I got into this one league. I think it was from the ages 9 to 13 or something like that. And it was a very intimidating process. First time playing organized basketball, didn't do much of anything. I may have scored 1 or 2 games that season, that whole season. as a 9-year-old. As a 10-year-old, I worked my behind off by that point, got a little bit better, scored a little bit more and played better defense. At age 11, I became really good, and I honestly became the best player in the league. And everyone knew it. They knew going into the game, oh, they're going to have to really stop Joel, okay? So I never forget, had a great season, an MVP type season, and we had an award banquet at the end. And what they do, as with most ceremonies, they'll save the best or the most highest achieving award for the end. And I've been through this process multiple times at this point, and I'm just honestly sitting there humbly waiting for my name to be called at the end. And just before the MVP award was given out, they created this new award, and they called my name for it. It was called the MIP, the Most Improved Player. I'm like, I didn't even want to go up. I'm like, what? Why is my name already being called? And I'm like, I've been doing my thing all year, right? This whole season, I know I've done my thing. We didn't win a championship though, right? But I knew I did my thing as an individual. And I'm like, man, at the end of it all, I'm sad. I'm a little sad and everything, because I just knew what I was doing. Everybody before the awards banquet, guys from the other team, like, yo, you get an MVP, right? All that stuff. Come to find out, after the awards banquet was a teammate of mine who was aging out of the league. He was about 13 years old. They said, out of respect, they wanted to give him the award. And I'm like, man, I get it, but and his father even told me, who was one of the coaches in the league, they said, yeah, we wanted to make sure we gave, he's been in this league for about 5 years or something like that. I'm like, man, I was just still sad as a kid. I quote unquote lost that trophy. It's funny. My mom, this happened when this was happening in 1996. My mom found the trophy in our garage about 3 years ago. I'm 37. I didn't want to see that trophy again. Super competitive as a kid. I'm like, I didn't feel like I deserved that. In hindsight, that was, being childish. But I remember thinking at one point too, like, man, if I helped us win the championship, if I actually helped our team win, then maybe I could have got it. Still may not have gotten it, who knows? But I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to come back even stronger as an individual, but we're winning the championship at the same time next year. And that's exactly what happened. Came back, I got MVP of the whole West Philadelphia YMCA League. And, we also got the championship. And I'm like, I became a better team player at that point. And not that I was selfish before that point, but as it became better, and I really began to focus more on myself and team.
Well, that is in a way a very impressive level of self-awareness for an 11-year-old kid, because at that age, if I can even remember that age, there's a self-centered perception on fairness. I've done this. I've worked very hard. Not only do I feel I've worked very hard, I know I'm working hard because everybody around me whose opinion is relevant and valid has told me I'm an MVP.
Mm-hmm.
But then I missed that and I felt, okay, that's not fair, because okay, this kid's aging out of the league, but I've worked for this. I've done this. Then sit back and say, after all the disappointment and frustration subsides a little bit, I mean, not totally, because you're 37, mom found your trophy recently. Right. So it's like not completely, but what would have made the difference? What would I have done differently? It might not be my fault, but how am I responsible for getting a most improved versus MVP trophy? That's impressive. Now you fast forward past your career in basketball. You've got your own business. What's been the most powerful way that lesson around it's not about me necessarily, but it's about we? How's that served you in your business?
Man, in so many ways, And this is more so of a revelation that I've had, enlightenment, whatever you want to call it. But so much, I've been trying to make so many bad things good, right? Getting into business, I'm trying to change so much. And recently, I just had to tell myself, like, I'm going about things mentally in the wrong way as far as my approach, my mentality. And I had to realize, even us as a people, obviously, this is business and life that I was thinking about recently. And, in recent years, I began just to make changes and realize, okay, it's not about changing all these things. It's not about making these bad things good all the time. And I just had to realize that so much of we're not put here to make the bad stuff good, right? I feel like the bad stuff has been put here to make us good. It's been put here to refine us so that we can learn from those things. And so I began operating in that way to where those that I service, clientele, I'm like, look, it's not about removing all of this bad stuff. It's about growing as a result of that bad stuff, using it against itself, and actually applying that bad to your arsenal, to your loadout, to what you carry with you, and saying it just can't even affect you anymore. It actually helps propel you. The anger, the sadness, all those things, do not throw it away. Use it. Use that stuff as motivation, as a focus for yourself. You just got to properly channel it. So in business, I began applying these type of mentalities, as a carryover from sport, just realizing, like, it's not about, changing the things that are unideal. It's about having those things work for us, assist us. And it's been helping me in business, having that approach, man. It's been amazing.
This has come up so often in the past 2 weeks. I think what I'm hearing you say is you went from a mentality of, okay, here's some problems, here's some challenges, here's some struggles. How do I deal with this? How do I resolve this? To, wait a minute, how do I use this?
Exactly.
And that created a deeper level of insight and thinking. I had a guy on the show recently who has Tourette's, like me, and he's an ambassador for the Tourette Syndrome Association in Australia. And that's a question that came up. What's been the most challenging part of Tourette's? What do you like about Tourette's?
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways, having Tourette's is like having a superpower. I mean, you're not nearly as cool as Iron Man, let's be fair. But there's certain benefits, but there's also a lot of liabilities. And it's like, how do you focus on the benefits?
Mm-hmm.
And it was crossing that chasm in my own mind where, okay, what can I use here? Because this is never going away. And maybe it shouldn't go away.
Mm-hmm.
Let's
Exactly.
talk about your book, because your book seems to be based on that entire theme. How do we extract strength from struggle? What was your inspiration to write that book, and talk about some of the most powerful lessons?
I mean, again, my inspiration was going through struggle. The struggle was the blessing. That was the sweet spot. And that's exactly, again, what I'm referring to, realizing that these struggle points, these difficulties, these challenges, these obstacles, they're all camouflaged opportunities for us. And that's one thing to where I had to realize, like, I'm trying so hard to get rid of all this stuff, to where it's like, this stuff is here to build me up. And that's the most difficult part for a lot of us, is we don't want to lean into the difficulty. I mean, who does? We just want to get rid of the difficulty. We want to, just get it out of our face. We want to, when the pain comes, we want the pain to go immediately. We don't want there to be any point to where it's just lingering. But I really feel like there's a chapter in my book called The Purpose of Our Pain. And I discuss becoming a student of the pain, because when you filter it and you really begin to break it down and you lean into it, you actually begin to learn from your pain. You understand your pain. You're able to honestly resolve the pain and not have it revolve to where it constantly comes back, maybe with a different face on it, maybe with a different person or a different venue, such at work, but you once went through that thing at home. And so it's about us really leaning into our circumstances a little bit more, as opposed to shying away from them, so that we can extract something from them and grow during that process of whatever it is we're going through. And again, that came by way of me going through just so many struggles, transitioning from an athlete, pro athlete, into just, again, the real world, in essence, like, man, going through depression, going through insecurities, like, who am I? I know I'm capable, but man, where can I show my capabilities in this world? Because my degree isn't being accepted. My degree in psychology is, they're saying, well, we don't need it here. And like, what do I do? So I just had all these questions and just began figuring out ways to use the insecurities, to use the anger, the sadness, the disappointment as a driving force.
So the two key questions that are popping up in my mind is not only how can I use this, but what can I learn from this?
Well, again, first off, when it comes to filtering, you're breaking down your circumstances. So you start to get into, honestly, emotional or mental brainstorming phase. And you learn so much about what you're going through. And that's, again, what we miss out on. We miss out on the lessons of life by way of life being thrown at us, especially when it's the sudden life that's thrown at us. Like, we really want that stuff to come and go. But the problem that we miss out on so many times is the fruit of that pain, the fruit of the problem. Is like, man, all of a sudden hindsight tells us and reveals it to us 6 months or 6 years later, when we actually could have leaned into it in the moment and got that same fruit right then and there. And that's, the tool of filtering is just really leaning into it, questioning what you're going through, but without emotion. Don't say, why am I going through this? Sit back and say, why am I actually going through this? Lean into it.
That's interesting, because we hear things come up, sage wisdom, something's not necessarily happening to you. If you pay attention, it's happening for you.
Exactly.
But when you're going through something, the typical response is, well, piss off with that. Exactly. Because you're in emotional reaction, you're in pain. And you're saying here, well, hold on, remove the emotion from it. Which is much harder to do in practice. Exactly. But when you start to transform challenges and frame them in questions, you start to utilize the executive centers of your brain. So not saying it's easy, but it becomes more accessible.
Exactly.
To step away as an observer and go, okay, what's really happening here? What am I really learning here? What am I not noticing because of how I'm feeling in the moment that might be valuable? And just even that dampens the emotional intensity.
Exactly. You see yourself. We don't often see ourselves outside of our own viewpoint. And that's, like you said, by dampening that and asking those questions, you start to carry different vantage points of yourself and your own circumstance. Just as a therapist would, just as a friend would, just as a parent or sibling, someone that knows you really well would, because now you're not being so stubbornly subjective to what you're going through. It's like, now you start to have more of an objective point of view, saying, okay, that's it. I'm glad I took a breath before I responded or reacted. And now you realize, I can think, at least 5 thoughts every couple of seconds, if I just take a second to myself for a moment. And it's just, that's really what it takes. Again, like you said, it's not easy to remove emotion. But man, it's worth it when you practice it, when you try it. The good thing about life is we have a whole lot of opportunities to practice, when it comes to retraining our default thinking and default reactions and default emotions even. You know what I mean? That's not an easy thing to do, but
default emotions.
That's a difficult thing to change. But when you are conscious about doing it, it's actually not hard to do. Like it could be a difficult level of transition when it comes to that. But that's often because we aren't aware of any tools to revert to, any protocols in place.
And you said something earlier that I was like, oh, that's really smart, because I think that's a powerful tool. There's a guy, Dick Schwartz, and he deals with family therapy. And one of the things people say all the time is, that's not me. And what he's saying is, there is no one singular you. There are different aspects of you. Right. And a lot of times he has his patients engage with various aspects of their personality. So they're looking at this situation or this challenge, as you said, from multiple vantage points, but it's them, but it's different aspects of them. Napoleon Hill, even in Think and Grow Rich, he had a committee of prominent people that he enormously respected in his mind. And he would imagine himself meeting with this committee and presenting some of his deepest challenges and thoughts and troubles. And it's just that way of saying, okay, how can I look at this a different way without being caught up in, but this isn't me. Yeah, we know that. But there's
right. Exactly.
Talk about some of your personal struggles. Like, what was something that you've been through where you're like, I don't know if I'm going to make it through this, but you started using these tools either by design or by default. You just discovered, wow, this is a better way of dealing with this.
Well, I mean, from an early age, man, I won't say too much, as far as going to a whole lot of different things, but I went through a few things even at an early age, growing up in an abandoned home, in Philadelphia, and, 6 years old, being 10 feet away from a shooting. And I was the only person there outside of the kid that got shot, and having to think I was gonna get shot in a moment at 6 years old, it's traumatic. And, you don't want to step outside for a moment because, they saw you, and those type of things that are difficult. Having a knife pulled out on me at 9 years old and called the N-word, it's like, whoa, okay. I knew about this stuff, but this is real. And, not long after that, losing one of my brothers traumatically, when I was a teenager. Like, going through those situations, I kept seeing, well, I'm making it out on the other side of it. Mm-hmm. And, I was able to channel the sadness, the anger, even the fear, because there was a lot of fear that came along with each of those things that I just mentioned. Obviously, it's a fearful moment, running away from a shooting as a child, having a knife put on. But I'm like, okay, I use that fear to increase my wisdom. Don't go to that area anymore. You're right. If you see something taking place, hey, maybe cross the street or, whatever you got to do. When one of my brothers passed away, I used that fear. I began to fear life. When that happened, I'm like, he was only 25. Am I going to make it to 25? Where I come from, a lot of the guys don't. And that was the scary thing. I'm like, man, it's just, and I had other friends who were killed. I'm like, who's next, right? Like, in the circle. And it's a morbid thought, but it was hard to get away from. But I began using the fear, the pain that I had against itself, and began applying it on the court. I began channeling and saying, okay, let me filter this pain. Let me extract some type of fuel from this fear that I have, from this anger that I have, because there's a whole lot of energy with that anger that I had, man. Robert, I'm talking about I was angry. I was sad, and there was so much energy. I cried myself to sleep at night. After my brother passed, I shut down. I just had to start using that energy and channeling it somewhere, and I extracted a whole lot of strength, a whole lot of just competitiveness. I was able to take it out on other people, in a good way, in sport, of course, but not, and just, going to school. And that was one of the first moments I really began to see as a teenager, to where I started channeling it properly. It was like, okay, I'm not out here getting in fights. I'm just going to channel this onto the court. And I just began practicing, man. Like, it was like, as if it was a movie and you saw a montage. And I mean it too. I just began working out to distract myself initially, because I didn't want to think about it. I would just go to the court, and I would just push ups in my room. I'll be watching TV, doing calf raises and push ups, just to not think about what happened. But it contributed to me on the court succeeding.
That is a unique experience in your environment that shapes you. I grew up in Coney Island, Brooklyn.
Okay.
And I grew up in Coney Island, Brooklyn, a physically deformed kid with Tourette's. Mm-hmm. So I was a target. Mm-hmm. It was just about every day I would get into a fight. And then there's people that that are around you, and then they're gone.
Yeah.
I just thought, that's just life.
It's crazy.
And then you move out of that environment and like, wait, that's not reality for everybody. Mm-hmm. But it shapes you in very interesting ways. And it could either break some people, and that's not a commentary on them. There's a lot of variables to that.
Right.
Or in my case, in your case, you find something else that you can obsessively focus on.
Exactly.
Kind of take yourself out of that. For you, it was training and sport. For me, it was mostly training. I became an obsessive gym rat. And I mean that affectionately.
Yeah.
But when you do come out the other side of that, for whatever reason, you do have lessons that are quite valuable, regardless of someone's background. What are a couple of lessons in that book, your book, where even if someone didn't go through what you went through, it can help them navigate and come out the other side of their challenges?
You won't be there forever, number one. That's one thing that we just have to be aware of in the moment. Like, awareness is the key thing. I really feel that, obviously it's good to have knowledge along with the awareness, but just to be aware of what you're going through. You're not gonna live there. It's that situation is coming and it's gonna go. So you can't allow it to last longer than it's supposed to, which we do. I feel like we carry on our situations and give life to them. I really believe that we feed our problems, but we should starve them. We should starve our problems, but we feed them, and we allow them to last a day or two, a month or two longer, maybe years or two longer than they actually have to.
A couple of decades. How many people do you know that define themselves by something that happened 20, 30, 40 years ago?
Exactly.
And again, that's not an indictment. That's
no,
feeling, oh my God, that's got to be so painful to carry that. Is there a difference in your observation of people between someone who cannot let go of something and someone who's able to sit in that space of, okay, this is happening to me, but it's not really defining me and this is not going to last? Is there a certain thought process or a tool that separates those two types of people? So the first person doesn't have to suffer so long unnecessarily.
Well, yeah, again, I really feel that we inflict our own suffering. That's not all the time, of course, but many times we do. There's a lot of self-sabotage that takes place with all of us. I'm not just saying there's no them or other situation. This is a us thing. I've done it, but I'm just more aware to not do it. Or if I try to catch it, I'm like, okay, I'm setting myself up for something right here. But a tool that I've used and I've written about it in the book is something I learned in sport. And I never forget, this was my senior year of high school. I would miss a shot, I may turn the ball over or something like that. And all of a sudden, for the next play, I'm pouting. And my guy on the other team that I'm supposed to be guarding scores on the other end, or the other team converts on a great play because I wasn't fully engaged in the next play because of what happened, right? So my coach, he would talk about this with me often enough. So he said, look, this is what you got to start doing. He said, the next time you miss a shot that you wanted to make, or you get a turnover or something like that, immediately tell yourself, next play. Snap out of it. Immediately tell yourself next play and focus on what you ought to be doing that moment.
So it's that specific trigger that gets your focus from the past right into the present.
Into the present.
Next play. That's an anchor.
Immediately. And it was just immediate. He said, look, you miss, next play. And you have that cue, man, Robert, I'm telling you, it helped me. It still helps me. That I was 16, 17 when he told me that. And I've been telling myself that ever since. And like, that was what I needed, because I stopped dwelling, I stopped harping, I stopped crying when I ought to be looking to celebrate, right? Like, there's so many times to where I'm so focused on the difficulty when I can actually in that moment be building toward a more successful moment. And that next play trigger for me really helped. And that's what I'm out to just really help people with on a daily basis, man.
I think that's worth the price of the entire podcast episode. Don't go anywhere. We still want you here, but that's worth the entire price of the episode, because can I just unpack what I heard?
Go for it.
Because it's simple, but it is so extraordinarily valuable. One is, there was a play, and maybe there were a lot of variables that were outside of your control. and that caused disappointment. But that disappointment directly produced consecutive disappointments in other plays because you were stuck there.
Exactly.
And while there were things that were going on that were challenging, there were opportunities happening on the court, and you missed all of them.
All of them.
Because your whole mindset was framed around what was disappointing. Here's something I think I heard you say that is critical, because in my coaching groups, we talk about it, and we use basketball. I mean, yeah, I'll go to, other games. I'll go to baseball games, but I really just go for the beer and the sunshine, because for me, basketball is a much more engaging sport to watch. No offense to baseball whatsoever.
Hey, look, I'm biased too. It's all right.
But when you go to any type of game or match, man, especially when you're at a home game and people are passionate, there's always two conversations going on. There's the conversation on the court, and then there's the conversation in the stands. And the conversation in the stands is highly judgmental. It's highly critical, and it's always about something and something that happened in the past. Because if we're talking about what the player should have done or could have done, easy for us. I mean, what are we doing? We're eating and drinking beer up in the stands. Well, that already just happened. We're not talking about the future. We're talking about the past. So it doesn't even occur in reality anymore. We're creating a historical commentary. And the question always is, does the conversation in the stands affect anything that goes on the court? And the answer is always no. Because one, it's in the past. Number two, nobody on the court can hear what the hell you're saying anyway.
Exactly.
Luckily, because most of the time, let's be fair, it's nonsense. And but the conversation on the court is so different. Nobody has time to talk about anything. It's not descriptive. It's declarative. And declarative language, the second you say something, something happens. Next play. The second I utter that, there is an immediate mental shift. It's affecting behavior, not just thought. It's affecting behavior, where what's going on in the stands, that affects nothing. But in our lives, we have so much descriptive language about this and about him and about her, and mom and dad did that. But then, like, when we switch to declarative language, that's when something happens.
Exactly. I mean, we have so many triggers, negative triggers, but we don't make ourselves aware of some positive triggers. Like, just imagine if we gave ourselves time to think about some positive triggers. Most of us can run off 3 or 4 negative triggers. Oh man, this teased me off. That gets me. I hate when this happens. What can take you to a place, of love, of ideal, circumstance, of ideal feeling, not just circumstance, but just the feeling. That's what's more important. That's what we really want. We want to feel good in different moments, but we don't give ourselves triggers and protocol, really, which is key, because we need some things to revert back or to look at and say, what can I do when this or that happens? It's not preparing in any morbid or pessimistic way. We just got to accept what life is about. Life just isn't perfect. Everyone doesn't have perfect health. Everyone doesn't have perfect finances. So if a situation comes up, do you have anything to go to that will still keep you feeling good about yourself, keep you from getting in such an insecure place to where you belittle yourself? We just need some things to be aware of in the moments of difficulty and challenge. And I feel like I've been through enough to where I was tired of not having anything, being honest with you, to where I had to just create something for myself to say, here's what I'm going to look at. Here's what I'm going to do if anything else arises, because I'm tired of going through this in the wrong way. And that's when I began, developing the method of filtering. And it's been a blessing, man. And that's why I said I had to write about it. I've been speaking it from the stage. I'm a speaker, so I've been telling people about it years before I even wrote about it. And I heard their feedback. I said, I have to finally put it in print. And I'm already getting feedback from people saying, wow, I didn't think about it from this or that perspective. But so much of exactly what we need is right in front of our eyes. It's amazing how we just overlook some things.
Well, I can see the value in it immediately. It lands with me. I know it's landing with a lot of listeners right now. And I'm always breaking things down into steps and models. I had brain damage. By the time I was in my mid-teens, I had it's estimated of over 10 major concussions. I had experimental medications, super high fevers. So for me, I always had problems learning and retaining information. So I'm always like, well, what's the acronym? What's the steps? And that kind of helps channel my thoughts. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier, awareness. Self-awareness is the first key. If I'm not self-aware, I'm not going to grow.
Right.
Second thing is reflection. So if I'm aware, I can reflect on my behaviors in a situation, say, well, what happened there? Where did I get stuck? And what's something quick in the moment that I could pull out to not only break that state, but channel my focus in a more constructive direction, whether it's next play or me and my wife have a thing where we get caught in rumination, because we do a lot,
For sure.
where we'll say a key word and that'll wake us up. Literally, it's connected to that word without saying what that word is. And it refocuses us immediately.
Perfect. And that, for me, again, it's in the beginning of the book, but the two words I tell myself often is filter it. And that's just, it brings me back to a place of just brainstorming and not just being so engulfed in whatever I'm going. That's the main thing it does. It slows me down for a moment. It makes me breathe for a moment. And it makes me brainstorm, like you said, breaking things down for yourself. That's what I do. I need to break. I feel like I'm a very simple-minded person, not in a negative sense, but I love when things are simple to understand. And if they aren't simple for me to understand, I don't want to have it be too complex. I want things to be simple for me. I don't want to be, I see Einstein, on your wall, and he had a very complex understanding of things, but I felt like he did an amazing job of breaking things down to where it was,
that bloke can walk into a bar and explain to anyone there, regardless of their age or occupation, theoretical physics in a way that they can understand. Now, if he started doing math, you've lost. Goodwill Hunting is confused now, but that's genius. It's how do I take the complexity of my understanding and my experiences, my education, wherever that comes from, and break it down to where you can understand it in a moment. I completely connect with that. There's something I also want to go into, because if you're a successful athlete, people look at you and applaud that, and rightfully so. Now, if you're a successful entrepreneur, you kind of get similar admiration. And then, well, a speaker, Gallup said, like, speaking is, number one fear is speaking. Jerry Seinfeld always quips that, number 6 fear is death. So that means if given the choice, most people rather be in the coffin than giving the eulogy. And that's funny.
That's great.
You've gone from domain to domain to domain successfully. There's a lot of people right now coming out of COVID where their lives are in question. And I mean that in a positive way, with saying, okay, who am I? We're on the tail end of the great resignation, where people are like, I'm not doing this for another day. I'm going to leave in the midst of uncertainty. What was it that prepared you to be successful? Because in a lot of ways, success in one area of your life prepares you for success in another area. But on the other hand, if you identify with being a really successful athlete, and it's like, okay, well, I'm going to go into another domain where I don't know anything. And if I don't do well in that domain, well, who am I? So in some ways, it makes it harder. What are some of the things that help you succeed over and over again?
Well, doing well, and I guess this can get into the whole, what's the definition of success? But, doing well is internal, right? It's about your personal fulfillment. That's where success is for me, and being able to successfully transition into different things. My internal definition at some point, or my internal feeling rather, as long as I'm consistent, with fulfilling myself with my transition, at some point it's going to begin to leak out and others will see what I feel inside. And they will also begin to feel like, okay, wow, he's doing it successfully. I had to first believe it. And that's really what began to happen, to where it's like, okay, I was successful over here. Now, there's nothing telling me, with all the hours, the blood, the literal blood, sweat, and tears I put into this industry as an athlete, I could just sit down and do that other industry. I could sit down behind a desk, or I go to the meetings, and I only have to use my mind, not only, but I have to use my mind and my knowledge. Obviously, I have to increase my knowledge. That was the main thing I had to do. I had to learn a lot more. I'm like, there's nothing telling me that I don't apply the same mentality over here that I won't be successful. I just had a talk with my 9-year-old son this morning in the car before, he got out for school, about what cause and effect is. It was probably about a 6-minute conversation or so on cause and effect. And I broke down exactly what cause and effect is. I said, that's all life is. We had a quick little basketball workout this morning before school. And I said, look, man, it's hard not to be great at something when you do it often. I said, it's really hard not to be. And I was just telling him in the car, like, if you want to be great at anything, he loves art. I said, if you want to be a great artist, you want to be great at basketball, which he does. I said, dude, do it often. I said, there's a whole lot of people that wants to be great, but they don't have a great cause toward the effect. I said, they may only do a little bit, every few days. They want this and they're disappointed in the end because they didn't do enough. I said, but for those that does something often, they're fulfilled, man. I was telling them, kind of breaking down a little bit of fulfillment as well. I said, you'll feel good about yourself, no matter the effect, no matter the result, you're going to feel good about it. So for me, the transitions was really me fulfilling myself with the movement, saying, okay, I feel good about what I'm doing. What others think, it really doesn't matter. I'm just being honest with you. And it just felt good to do what I was doing. Honestly, no matter who saw it, it just felt good. And soon people began to see it. And I just kept doing it. And all of a sudden say, oh, wow, he's doing well in business. I'm like, I knew that. Humbly, I say that humbly, but I knew I was doing well. I felt that already.
Yeah, so there was a confidence there because you've already done it in one area. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about cause and effect.
Yeah.
So if I understand your definition of consistency, the way you frame the world is for every effect, it can be traced back to specific causes.
Absolutely.
Effects are the outcomes,
and
the causes are the behaviors.
Yep.
Say, okay, there were certain behaviors, and I love that, because what we talk about so often, and I'm not saying it's not useful, I'm not saying it's not important, but it's incomplete. A lot of conversations that you would have, and you would say, well, what does it take to be successful in sport? People say, well, you have to believe, and you have to be confident, and you have to be motivated. Yeah, all of that is great, but no one ever scored a point because of their level of belief.
No.
It's a behavior. It's a series of behaviors that leads to this ball going in that basket.
Exactly.
And if that does not happen, it doesn't matter your level of confidence. It doesn't matter your level of motivation. Behaviors are producing outcomes. Yep. And you're like, okay, there were certain rituals I did where if I would do a series of behaviors every single day for a certain amount of time per day, there would be an outcome.
Yep.
So I can apply that to any area of life.
Any area of life. I mean, our minds and our bodies rewards our commitment, period. Like our bodies know, let's say by muscle memory, again, you being a gym rat knows, like, okay, your muscles will remember a certain stimulus. They'll remember a certain level of weight that you did the last time. So now you can level up, a half pound more or a pound more. We're rewarded for our commitment, and that's just really what it boils down to where if you kind of break things down that way, you don't have to worry about being good at something. You don't have to worry about it. And that's one thing, I've done in the past where I worried about, am I going to do well? Am I going to be good? Nope, Joel, just put in the time. That's going to be the byproduct of your time being put in. And guess what? If you come up short, I can guarantee you, you will still have become so great during that process, you can pursue something just as great as you came up short in pursuing, or even greater, because now you've developed yourself. now you're built for even a greater goal, possibly. And no matter what, whether I get a thing or not at the end, I became an amazing person in the process. So that's really what I began to just realize. I stopped worrying about life so much. And I'm a religious person as well. So I just began worrying less and praying more and get my behind to work, and realizing, faith without works is dead. I'm like, all right, bet, let's do this. Let me get to work.
So, and I keep unpacking because there's so much value in what you're saying, and you're saying it fluidly. So I'm just like, okay, what did I get out of that? Get out of your story and just focus on the behaviors again.
Yep. That
And
moment.
even when you fall short of what your expectation is, look at what went right as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because even though you might not have hit your initial expectation, there's a lot of growth and progress that took place in between behaviors and outcomes that you need to appreciate because you can leverage that.
Exactly. I mean, and that's really what it's about. Again, bringing up my son again, he loves the 80s, right? So again, he's 9 years old, for goodness sake. He's born in 2013. But
good man.
I'm an 80s fanatic, born in the 80s, and I love 80s movies and even movies that, even a little bit before that. So he loves Rocky, he loves boxing. So I come from a boxing family. And I was recently talking to, a crowd. This was a couple years ago, actually, when I asked them this. I said, who knows about the Rocky movies and this and that? And, almost everybody raised their hands. Now I would ask them, okay, what's your favorite one? I would tell them, well, I told them, mine is Rocky 4, right? And so a few of them raise their hands. So I would say, who's number one? Not a whole lot of hands go up. I'm like, all right, who's number two? Some hands go up, three. See, a lot of hands go for 3 and 4. This and that, or 2 and 4, I remember. And I asked a few, what's your favorite part? Oh man, that one part at the end, he's kind of thinking back on, all his training and this and that. And then other people, oh, that part when he's actually training and this and that. And what I told them was, I said, you want to know why that's your favorite part? I said, because the end goal isn't the most important thing. It's the process that we appreciate more than anything else. We remember the process more than anything else. When we think back on our achievements, our wins, we remember the process. That's what we talk about. That's what we celebrate. Like, we may get a trophy in the end. That trophy doesn't make us a winner. The process does. The journey does.
That leads my mind into, like, I just go over, sometimes I'm banging on about the same things because I'm passionate about them. There's a lot of conversation about lazy people who are not willing to do the work. And that drives me mental because there's another saying that I don't totally agree with, and how you do anything is how you do everything. Mm-hmm. Now, I know some people who are incredible in their career, right, and they are a train wreck at home, and, right, and vice versa. Right. So how you do anything is not necessarily how you do everything. Mm-hmm. But there's values there. How intrinsically connected are you on a value level to what you're doing? And what I've observed, what I've experienced is when what you're doing is aligned with what you really value, the payoff is in the process. You're not doing it for the outcome. The outcome is an unavoidable byproduct. You're doing it because you love doing it. Amazing. Yep. You said something earlier that I want to connect to what you just mentioned about that process. So I don't care what anybody thinks. I have a sneaking suspicion that when somebody knows they should be doing something, but they don't do it, it's not because they're lazy, because there are other areas in their life where they're doing a lot more than most people would do. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes they're pursuing something that is someone else's value, not theirs, or they are so hung up, they're so in need of acceptance. Like, if I do this, if I succeed, people in my life won't approve of me. Well, they won't approve of the way I'm doing it, and I'll lose love. I'll lose my support group. How did you resolve that? How did you get to a place where it's like, okay, I have my own reasons, and I don't really care about what anybody else thinks?
You know what? Before I go into that, I'm gonna go take it even a step further with why people tend to do things like that. I feel like others will take on other people's objectives, missions, whatever the case is, so that just in case they come up short and they fail at it, they have someone to blame. They don't have to blame themselves. They don't have to look in the mirror and hold themselves accountable because they know they were doing somebody else's thing, and they can blame that person or blame that circumstance or that schooling or whoever for what they had to do. They didn't have to do anything. They had a choice, but they so often will want to have that scapegoat.
All right, that's insightful.
You know, but for myself, it came because I noticed that if I came up short in the past, those that really mattered to me had the same response. And that was important for me. When I succeeded, they loved me. When I failed, they loved me. And that was important for me. When I succeeded, strangers loved me. When I failed, they didn't care for me. I wanted to love. We all do. We want to feel good consistently. And once I begin to think about if there is anyone outside of myself that I'm trying to please, which are my loved ones, my close friends, you know, they're the only ones that matter to me outside of myself. And I begin to say, you know what, it really doesn't matter what others think. You know, and the love helped me get there. It wasn't the hate. It was the love that helped me get there because it's like, you know what? Strangers really don't matter. Now, when I say I don't care what others think, that doesn't mean everybody. I care what my son thinks. I care what my parents think, my siblings think. I do. Absolutely. But everyone outside of that close, very close circle, it doesn't matter to me because they're going to fluctuate with my results. My results aren't always consistent. You know, some things are out of my hands, and I'm okay with that. I don't mind failing. That's a part of the process. But that's what helped me get there. It was just getting the consistent love and favor and pats on the back from those that truly matter to me, and realizing those who fluctuated doesn't matter to me. And that's the bulk of people. You know, like the bulk of society is those that aren't your family. You know what I mean? I had to realize their opinions of me don't matter, especially if it's not favorable. Because if it isn't favorable, those things, if I were validated by those things, would bring me down every time my results aren't favorable. So I had to stop focusing on that and saying, you know what? Let me just do what I do to the best of my ability, and whatever happens, man, it happens. Joel, be fulfilled by the fact that you gave it your best, period.
That is so absolutely valuable because it's not like I don't care what anybody thinks. I'm not open to critical feedback. I'm just not open to that feedback from people who are not invested in me. Right. I can't invest in people who are not investing in me. Exactly. And how do you tell those people? How do you tell people who are invested from those who are uninvested, who's still around no matter what happens?
I mean, it's no matter what they know. They know as far as my interaction with them. You know what I mean? And for me, it's just really about, again, I'm big on my circle, you know, whether it be my family or my close friends. And I seek feedback, as you just mentioned. I seek it. Mm-hmm. I want to get better. When people have been buying the book of late, and they've been sending me screenshots and texts or DMs on Instagram or Facebook, I don't even know some of these people. Hey, this really spoke to me. Hey, what do you think about it? I'm just still curious. I'm a very curious person. So I am still curious about the feedback of others. But again, I filter that stuff. Like if it's negatively critical, I'm like, all right, cool. I sought that out.
Context as well. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. You know, but I can get something from that because, you know, they actually may be correct in a sense. Mm-hmm. If I am open, right? So I don't completely disregard all of this stuff if it's negative feedback or not. But I'm at a point now, fortunately, thank God, seriously, to where the negative feedback doesn't bring me down to where I doubt myself and I become insecure. That used to happen often.
So
Being
you're
honest,
open to it, just not defined by it.
not defined by any means. I define myself. I
And
define
I think
myself.
that is such a big roadblock for people. I think that this is a critical thing to discuss, because if you look at anybody in your life that you were trying to get their approval, they're probably not around anymore.
Nope.
Whether you got their approval,
Right.
you didn't get they're gone. Where the people who are truly your people, your family, your close friends, your business partners, people, yeah, if they're telling you, you're like, my wife supports me in anything. She is super supportive, but she will tell me directly in no uncertain terms, you're being a moron. And I'll listen because
Right.
I know she loves me. I
Right.
don't have
Right.
to agree with her, but
Mhm.
I'll listen to her and I'll take that on.
Absolutely.
I know, like, she's my family.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the most important thing. You need those people. You know what I mean? That's those are the people you need behind you, alongside you, in front of you. Because that we're all, I feel, melting pots of other people. And if we're not open to feedback, criticism, especially again from those that we know are in our corner, because it can be dangerous to be open to feedback from those that aren't in our corner. You just got to know your circle, know your audience, know your surroundings, and know who loves you. And that's who I'm extremely open to. The wall isn't there. If I feel like you don't truly know me or don't have my feelings in your best interest, it's not even about my business. We can be business partners. You may not have my business in my, you may have my business in your best interest, but not my feelings. My feelings will matter to me the most. Because how I feel, will dictate how I interact with you and move forward and stuff like that. If you don't have my feelings in your best interest, the trust isn't there. I feel like the integrity isn't there from your end. And it's a difficult thing. So I just make sure I dissect and filter the feedback that I hear. Even again, I seek it out, but that even helps me even more to embrace the negative feedback because I seek it out. I control a lot of the feedback that I get, surveys, you know. So I'm looking for things not to be ideal. So I can even pinpoint, say, okay, how can I improve my next product? Right? Like, how can I improve my service so it can be truly on a silver platter and not this, bronze platter? Maybe I can improve it. And so, I mean, that's what really helps me. And I wrote about this in the book as far as defining yourself, in that a way, a mistake that we've often have made is we obviously allow other people to define us, right? And it's because we don't spend enough time with ourselves, self-reflection and things like that, learning who we truly are as individuals, ourselves, so that when people have critiques of us in a negative way, we don't get all bent out of shape about it because we already know who we are. So often we don't truly know who we are because we haven't spent enough time reflecting on who we truly are, that we lose sight and start believing other people. And we get upset about it. It's like, nope, you can say 1,000 bad words about me right now. I won't believe you because I know who I am. I spend enough time thinking about who I am, developing who I am to where I am confident in who I am as a man, as an individual, as a father. You can say as many bad things you want to about me as a father. I know who I am as a father. You can say as many bad things about me as a son. I know who I am as a son, so I won't believe it.
When you talk about simplicity and communicating value in a way that's palatable, there are themes that keeps coming up in this conversation, and self-awareness and taking time for self-reflection. Those are two critical themes. So I know people are thinking it. I want to get this book. Where do we get more information on you? Where do we go to buy your book?
Well, you can the book is on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. I'm sure everybody's on between those two. But you can find information on me at my website, joelbgreen.com. I'm often on Instagram as well, pretty heavy on there as far as an engagement side. I get back to anyone that contacts me. J Green PLT, that's JAY Green PLT. I'm on Facebook. I'm on, the major platforms. So I would love to connect with you guys. Would love, absolutely love to hear your feedback on my book, Filtering: The Way to Extract Strength from the Struggle. I know it would be an amazing help to you guys.
Well, we love connecting with you. Thanks for all your insight. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks, Robert. I really appreciate it.